Hey guys, what's going on? Welcome back to the channel 21 Hunting and Fishing. Hope you're having a great day. So if you saw the thumbnail, which I'm sure you did while you clicked on it, there is so much discussion about bluefin tuna and the moon and when do they bite and when don't they bite that I just decided to get to the bottom of it. I think if you've watched more than two of my videos, I basically do all my own research and make decisions for myself. And the cool thing about tuna here is that all the landings keep very close fish counts. And then there's another website that I'll get into that has historical uh, fish counts that you can look at. And so I decided to do my own analysis. I do a lot of sort of data analysis for work. I have an engineering degree. I have a master's in finance. I'm not trying to brag or anything, but what I'm saying is that I have some credibility when it comes to taking large piles of data that don't mean anything when you're just looking at it and digesting it and trying to figure out trends. Because if you can do that in an engineering career, you can find out what the problem is and fix it. If you can do that in a finance career, you can figure out how to make money. Now, I am putting these skills to the best use that I know how, and I'm going to show you what does the data say when it comes to tuna in the moon and full moons, new moons, all this stuff. And I'm also going to show a little bit of other pelagic species data that I had that I kind of already recorded a little bit. And one thing about this is, although all this data is available, I still have to hand jam it into a spreadsheet, which takes some time, but I'm willing to do it because I find this stuff really interesting. And this is all to say the best time to go fishing is when you can go. Don't go changing your plans around just because you saw this video, blah, blah, blah. This data is only based off of one landing at Seaforth Landing. And if you find it interesting, I'll do the same exact analysis for data from the other landings. There's a whole bunch of landings out there, and you can go back and you can look at. In this case, I was looking at last year's tuna counts and to figure out what the tuna and the moon and what does the data say. And here's the other thing: the numbers are what they are. That's a good thing and it's a bad thing, and we'll kind of get into that a little bit when it comes to data analysis. But you really can't argue with what I found. It is purely just an analysis of what the data says. 1 is 1, 2 is 2, 1.5 is 1.5, that type of thing. Now, when it comes to data analysis, there can be some debate on like the assumptions that you make and how you actually digest the data. That's where, if you have a better way to do it, please let me know. But given the data that is available, it's the best way that I know how for historical context. Now, I'm just going to get into it. I'm going to start getting too far ahead of myself, but I really want to talk about the data first because this is the foundation that this house is built on. Okay, so let's get started. All right, so you have moon phases. Everyone knows about the moon phases. Everyone knows that the moons cause tides, da 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 da. But I hear here and there that, bluefin don't bite on such and such moon, or they do bite on this moon, or before and after such and such, moon cycle is the best time to go. Again, the best time to go fishing is when you can go, but I just like doing this. I think it's fun. But so here you see just a bunch of data, right? Just moon data. You have the new moon, first quarter, full moon, third quarter, and the duration of the moon, always right around that 29-day mark. And that in of itself doesn't really help, right? Like I'm looking for data. So how do we talk about what the new moon is in data, in numbers? What's the full moon? How do we talk about the full moon in data, in numbers? Because this is data analysis. This isn't word analysis. We need to figure out numbers. And one other thing I learned in the military is before we ever did anything at night, we always knew what the percent illumination of the moon was, because that would tell you if you really need to bring your NVGs. You probably do, but like it gives you an indication. Like if you're going out on a night op and it's a new moon, you're gonna have zero illum, and so you're gonna have to figure out, how you're gonna be able to see at night, i.e. NVGs. And so that's when I learned that the moon has percentages. So you can see here in the middle number on my screen that in this case on Friday, April 4th, 2025, the moon's age is 39.66%. 30, let's call it 40%. Well, what does 40% mean? 40% means that it's the percentage of the full moon. So essentially, in the moon cycle, you can see it's a rising moon, so that means this number is going to be going up all the way to a full moon. A full moon is, essentially 100% illuminated. The moon is full. It's 100%. And so you can see, and over here on the right, it has moon phase, first quarter. So somewhere along the line, somebody much smarter than me said, when the moon illumination is between X and Y, we're going to call that the first quarter. And when it's between X plus a number and, X plus another number, that's a different phase of the moon. And so let's get a little bit deeper into that. So there you go, 39.66% is the first quarter moon. It just happens to be on April. I was showing you the other day, Friday the 4th, April 2025. And there you go, first quarter. All right, so that's cool. Now I'm just trying to show you. So when the moon phase is new, meaning you can't see the moon is completely black, it's only 1%. So that's what a new moon is. It's 1%. And then when you have, something upwards of 98%, you have the moon phase is full. And it always tells you what direction. So is the illumination going up or down? The moon's just a cycle. It's been happening for billions and billions of years. Okay, so now you understand how I am going to translate those English words, full moon, new moon, those words into a number. And it's pretty easy to do, and I'll show you. Now, I had to go through day by day for the number of days I covered on this slideshow here, on this data analysis, and then hand jam, 98 into a spreadsheet. Okay, now it's 83. Okay, blah, blah, blah. It takes some time is the point. If you think you find this interesting at all, I will totally do this for other landings as well. I just picked Seaforth only because that's generally how these historical fish counts are saved. You can click on a landing. You can probably go and click on individual boats if they save their own fish counts. And so you can basically do this for any number of situations, landings, boats, what have you. But anyways, I'm showing you this because I want you to understand how I am getting something like the full moon and turning it into a number. So that's step one. Okay, now obviously the fish counts, I went to sportfishingreport.com. You can click around. They have a whole bunch of really cool ways to drill down to numbers. I think even like freshwater. Super cool. Nothing like this existed when I was growing up. The only way you knew fish were being caught is if your dad was sitting at the bar buying his buddy beers and he'll, maybe release some secrets, that type of thing. So look how cool this blue lingcod is in the middle of the screen. So the lingcod will turn blue like this. They look like a Smurf. This kid is killing his rock fishing days. Look at this. What do they call this? Buttermouth? These big ass lips, or a tree fish or something. I don't know. Don't listen to me. This kid over here on the left's got some really nice stripers. So apparently there's some stripers being caught off the surf. So I'm going to have to explore that. But for now, I'm getting super distracted by these cool fishing photos. So we're going to get back on track. I'm just trying to show you where I am getting my fish counts. All right, so Data has limitations, and there are some assumptions that you need to make when you're doing any sort of data analysis. And depending how your experience or what your assumptions actually are, it might be a really good assumption. Some might be really obvious, some might not be. So you kind of have to, this is where, other than just like the science of just the numbers being calculated, this is where a little bit of the art comes in when you're talking about data analysis. Okay, so first I use the dock totals. They're large numbers, but I can't tell which trips we're targeting which species, right? So I'll show you in a second that the numbers that I was picking from in order to get my fish count, and why that's important. Uh, Assumption that I have is essentially any boat on a day and a half trip or longer is targeting some sort of pelagic fish, any of them that's biting. Uh, Considering in the summer months, this is probably a pretty good assumption. So basically what I'm saying is that, there's a lot of noise in some of this data, and I will show you how I think the best way to control for all that noise is. You can disagree, that's great. Um, I'm also doing it with the data I have, and there are other data sources out there that maybe I could use different data sources that I don't have to make those assumptions. For example, if I went on the Pacific Queen's historical fish count and I looked for their fish counts between June, July, and August of the summer of 2024, I can pretty much assume and know that they were going out to target bluefin tuna. That's important because they didn't stray and go target rockfish, for example. I mean, maybe they did if they got limits of bluefin tuna, but what I'm trying to say is you got to make some sort of assumptions here, and it's sometimes, depending on what it is, it's probably a pretty good one. Also, here's something else that I think is really important for data analysis. And sorry, this is getting a little bit nerdy, but I'm also trying to show that I think there is some credibility in doing an analysis like this. And it's fun, right? Again, go fishing, we can go fishing. Don't change the dates of your charter just because you heard some guy on the internet talking about numbers and bluefin tuna and tuna. Go fishing, we can go fishing. That's my number one message. But in probability theory, the law of large numbers is a mathematical law that states that the average of the results obtained from many independent random samples eventually converges on the true value if it exists. So I'll give you an example in sports. So, in the playoffs, they'll play 7 games because the theory is that after 7 games, that's a large enough sample of games to determine which team is better, right? Team A might beat Team B on the first game, but then Team B might sweep the rest. So if you just went off of that first game, you didn't get a large enough sample size to determine who was actually best. I hope that makes sense. It's not that 7 is a large number, but I'm trying to break this down the best I can. It's kind of how focus groups work, right? They'll take a sample of just certain people over a certain cross section of society and ask them how they feel about something, anything, I don't know, some sort of product. They'll make assumptions that, eventually if they talk to enough people, that whatever they say, even though it's not everybody, it's actually going to kind of end up being true. All right, so now you have a bunch of data and stuff like this. So in data analysis, you're gonna look for trends or spikes. And when I say spikes, you'll see what I mean when I show you the graphs. Like once I graphed the data. And one thing I did keep was fish per angler is the constant variable. So what am I trying to say? So first, look for spikes. That's after I graph the data. You can see the spike go up and come back down. And then fish per angler is constant. So I think I just kind of need to show this since I've talked about it a couple times. So here's an example. June 1st, 2024. So you have 112 calico bass, 100 bluefin, 58 vermilion rockfish, 49 rockfish, blah, blah, blah. So in this data of 3 boats over 5 trips, there are boats that aren't targeting bluefin tuna, but their angler number is showing up here. But what one of the assumptions I'm making that is that I'm always just going to compare the bluefin tuna against the angler number, because now I kind of have controlled for that variable, being that not every boat is going out for bluefin tuna. So is 100 bluefin tuna good? I don't know. If there's 10 guys fishing, it's damn good. If there's 1,000 guys fishing and they come back with 100 bluefin tuna, not so good. Your chances of catching a bluefin tuna that day was 10%. So one thing I learned in the finance world is all about ratios. It doesn't matter how much money you have coming in if you don't know how much money is going out. You can increase the number of money coming in all day long, but if the money going out is increasing at a faster rate, you're going to go bankrupt. So I'm going to use a ratio of bluefin per an angler, and I'll show you what that kind of looks like in a second. And the fact that I'm including everything, but I'm including it all the time in this analysis, it actually kind of cancels it out because I've controlled for it. Okay, so after I put a whole bunch of numbers on a spreadsheet, it looks like, what you see, all these numbers on the left. I was looking at bluefin, yellowtail, yellowfin, dorado, blah blah blah. And this is I did this a while ago in 2022. And then you get some graphs, right? And so I'm going to go through some of this shorter time period in 2022, just to try to get you warmed up a little bit on what these graphs really look like. And then here's just more spreadsheet stuff for the majority of this analysis, which I did for 2024, those 3 summer months. You can see, one bluefin tuna was caught for 78 anglers, so you get less than 0.0 bluefin per angler, and the moon was 7%. And then the next day, 8-7, holy crap, 224 bluefin tuna and 209 anglers. So the number of anglers went up, but the number of bluefin tuna caught went way up for some reason. That next day, that's all it takes is one day. And then you get that 1.1 bluefin per angler, and full moon is 14%. Now, remember, I don't know how many of these 209 anglers are actually going for bluefin, and that's why I kept it constant. So I tried to control for that. And if you were going on a trip and you said, maybe you went on a 2-day trip and the numbers are going to be like each person on this boat is going to catch 1.1 bluefin, you're like, that's not very good. But keep in mind, these boats crushed it. But because I can't take out the anglers that weren't targeting bluefin, I kind of have to keep them in, or else I'm just kind of injecting too much of some other dynamic into this data. So all this data, just a lot of data, blah, blah, blah. It's not really useful until you start graphing it, like kind of like the screenshots you saw already. So just to get you guys warmed up. Okay, so this is July to August 2022 yellowtail against the percent moon illumination. My head just blew up. You said we are going to talk about tuna. I am going to talk about tuna, but I'm just trying to show you some other stuff that I kind of had in the back pocket already to get you warmed up of what you're going to see. So this orange line is the percent of full moon. So you see how it always goes somewhere between 0 to 1. So here on day 1, we have day 1. It's somewhere coming out of this new moon phase. And then on day 14, it is full moon. It's at that 1. And then on day 29, 28, around there, it goes back to its new moon. And then the blue line is, in this case, yellowtail per angler. And so on day one they got 2, and then on day 2 it was, pretty low, almost 0. And then you see this line, this blue line, is just kind of going up and up and up. Really doesn't seem to have any correlation with the moon. I've also never really heard about yellowtail bite correlating with the moon, and so there's nothing really to conclude about this. So I guess the only thing you could really conclude is, so if day 1 was July 1st and day 37 uh, is somewhere in August. Now I don't think those are actual days, but basically, um, as July turned into August, more and more yellowtail got caught. Probably not earth shattering. The water got a little bit warmer. People started putting GPS trackers on kelp patties, blah, blah, blah. I can't really say anything about the moon, and does the moon have a impact on the yellowtail bite? From this data, I can't tell. I don't think so. Okay, let's move on. Okay, so here's some yellowfin tuna data versus the percent of the moon illumination. So this is a little bit more interesting. And so here you have yellowfin tuna per angler on the left side, all the way up to 1. So remember, in the case of this, 1 equal means 100%, which means full moon, and then the number is obviously yellowfin tuna per angler. So you kind of see, starting at day 1, the where's my pointer? Here we go. I should have been using this. So here you see the moon cycle going up to full moon, and you really don't see any increase in yellowfin. And then here's something kind of interesting. Like right before the new moon, you have this spike in yellowfin tuna action. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that's like 5 days before the new moon, and then it, they found the schools basically, and you kind of see how the number between day 25 when they found the school, and then they were probably chasing the school around and picking them off here and there. That blue line just kind of hovers around that like 0.2 yellowfin tuna per angler. Remember, that's 0.2 yellowfin tuna per all the anglers that went out of Seaforth Landing. Again, I'm looking for trends. I see, I'm not so concerned about the 0.2, but I am concerned about this spike, and I like how this blue line kind of stays a little bit under. It shows that they caught the yellowtail. The yellowfin. They figured it out. All right, so let's move on. Okay, so here's July to August of 2022. Again, I already had some of this data keyed in. I'm going to go look at last year's data and the next slide, but because I already had some of this data entered into my spreadsheet, I'm sharing it anyway. So here's something interesting. So again, we have the moon phase going from day 1 closer to new moon all the way up to day 14. It's a full moon, and now you have this massive spike in bluefin tuna activity right before the full moon. So that's, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4.5 days before the full moon. The BFT are on the chew. Now, I kind of have to make an assumption that spike didn't happen because that's just happens to be the first day that the sport boats were looking for them. I have to make the assumption that they were trying their hardest the entire time, and they probably found schools, but some reason they all of a sudden got a lot of bluefin tuna action here on what would be July 11th, and or somewhere around there. And I mean, just go back and look at historical data. What day in July was that first full moon? It's going to be, somewhere halfway through July. So that's pretty interesting. And then the number goes way down. Then you see a little bit of an uptick on the full moon. Then it goes down, and then you see this other uptick after the full moon. So that's interesting. So the full moon happened on the 14th. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So 5-ish days after the full moon, there was an uptick in activity. And then it kind of goes down. It's pretty much they didn't find them at all during the uh, 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 new moon. And then, here you go. You got a little bit of action uptick day 34, 35, and 36 of those days in July and August. I couldn't figure out, or I just didn't take the time, or didn't want to put the actual dates on the x-axis. The numbers are good enough because I'm not concerned about the date so much. This analysis isn't about on what date did the bluefin tuna bite. This analysis is about on what percentage of the moon illumination did the bluefin tuna bite. That's two different things. Okay, so now you get warmed up a little bit on a smaller data sample set, what have you, of what I'm looking for. Okay, so now let's talk about Seaforth Landing, June 1st to August 31st of last year. Now I have 3 months of data packed into one graph, so it looks like one of those heart rate monitors or some crap. It looks a little bit messy. But what I did do is I added stars to things that I found pretty cool. Now, you could probably have starred a few more here, like this guy, that guy's interesting, this guy's interesting, but I just didn't. Sue me. It's free, okay? I only have so much time to do this. So here you go. This first spike, super interesting. This is way outlier. This is, aside from this guy, which we're going to talk about in a second, this spike right here is pretty interesting. So that happens on a certain day, and I'm going to actually write the days in the next slide. And then you have the full moon, and here's kind of another spike that's kind of interesting. So you have a bite right before the full moon. So that's like the night before the full moon. And then you see this drop off like during the full moon. And then some time goes by, didn't get any. Then you see this other huge spike after the full moon. So now the moon is going into its new moon cycle all the way to where it says day 35 here. And now the data starts going back up. The full moon percent illumination goes back up. But you don't see, here's what's kind of interesting. You don't see this other spike here. So essentially this would be the first full moon in August. You don't get the same spike in bluefin tuna activity as you did on that first full moon in June. Why is that? I don't know. My thought could be that they say, the bluefin go up the coast and then they turn back around, come down the coast. So maybe in July, this July moon phase, that's when they were kind of like, the majority of the school is already passed. And now, but then the next big uptick in bluefin tuna activity is this day. So that's interesting. So I starred that. Now that's so many days after the full moon. So we're going to take a look at that. Now the full moon goes to 0 again. So now it's a new moon. And so, you kind of see something similar over here all the way to the left where it says day 7. You see like this down tick and it kind of troughs with the new moon. It's a little bit different over here where it says, day 65, where you actually have an uptick with the new moon. So day 7, you see a downtick with the new moon. Day 35, you see a downtick with the new moon. And then day 65, you see an uptick with the new moon. I don't know, guys. That's just bluefin being bluefin. I am just showing you what the data says. I really didn't come into this thinking that, they bite or don't bite on such and such moon, because I always just go fishing when I can go. But I also like data because it helps you take some of the emotion out of what you're talking about. The numbers are what they are. So then going over to the right a little bit more, so somewhere between day 73 and day 75, I'm pretty sure that would be like day 74, you have another uptick, and then you get like this other uptick shortly thereafter, and then it goes way down, and then you got a little bit of an uptick that is again right before, depending how good your eyes are, but it is basically the same thing that you see on that June moon cycle. You see over here on this June moon cycle how like the day before you get to the peak full moon, see how it's like this isn't like a perfect little point. It's just the way the moon works, I guess. It just got a little bit more illuminated, but I don't know, the tuna seemed to know. And then as soon as it got completely full, the activity dropped. So you kind of see that same thing over here. So on day 81, you see an uptick in bluefin tuna activity. Then like the next day, it looks like it starts going down. And then you have the next biggest uptick is this guy over here, the star all the way to the right. And now that's so many days after the full moon. And so I know this this graph goes up and down, up and down, up and down. Again, there's so many variables to account for. Bluefin being bluefin, uh, you know, all these different factors. The weekend. So one thing I want to control for is if I had better, what I could do. Again, this takes a long time, and there's like 1,000 more things I want to do with this data. I want to do the same thing with other landings, and then I want to analyze some other factors. Like what if I only looked at the weekends, or what if I only looked at the boats that went out for a day and a half or more? If I could get that data, clean the data up. There's a lot of noise here because with this analysis I didn't take the time yet to like take out all the boats that were only doing half day trips. Now all those the bluefin numbers stay the same, but the angler number goes down, right? And so if I could control for that, it probably wouldn't be so noisy. But it also makes it a little bit more challenging in finding the trends and these spikes. And maybe these are the bluefin tuna are always here, but the spikes that when they go down is because it's middle of the week and there wasn't a lot of multi-day trips going on or something like that. So the data is what it is. Again, you can clean it up. I would be happy, and it'd be really cool if I could watch your YouTube video about the data analysis that you did with the bluefin tuna per percent moon illumination. I would watch it if you made one, so I could do a better job. So I just went through this graph. It took a while. I hope there's not too many questions, but again, let's just recap. This orange line is the moon going through its phase like it has done for millennia, very, very stable. And then the blue line looks like my heart as I'm trying to reel in a bluefin tuna. It's all over the place. I might die. No, I'm gonna live. Oh my God, I'm gonna die. And then finally, hopefully I get a bluefin tuna on the boat. But so here's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This is 6 data points that I want to look into further, because now I want to compare when these things happen in the moon cycle. Let's look at the spikes only. So if you look at the date and then the percent moon illumination, these are the spikes. So in July 11th of 2022, your moon percent was at 80%, and that was 4 days before the full moon. In June 18th, 2024, your moon was at 76%. Oh, look at that. That was also 4 days before the full moon. That's interesting. Now, what about the other spikes going across after the full moons? On July 29th, 2024, the moon percent was at 47%. That's 8 days after the full moon. And then on August 12th, 2024, that's 48%. That's 8 days after the new moon. August 12th, 2024, 48%. That's 8 days after the new moon. August 15th, 2024, 68%, 6 days before the full moon. So that's interesting. This is a bit of an outlier. So you see how we have like 70s and 80s, then we have 40s, 40s, then we have a 68. But the bluefin tuna didn't get the memo that day. I think they forgot to check their moon chart, and they showed up a couple days and started biting a couple days earlier than they did on these days. And then on August 28th, 2024, you have 44%. That's 9 days after the full moon. So let's graph this a little bit. Let's put some more illustrations to it. Okay, so 6 days before the full moon, we had a pretty good bite. 4 days before the full moon, we had a pretty good bite. A completely different moon cycle, 4 days before the full moon, we had a pretty good bite. Now we're talking about days after the full moon. 8 days after, so about a week after the full moon, we had a pretty good bite. Oh shoot, on a completely different moon cycle, we had another good bite 8 days after the full moon. And then on a completely different other moon cycle, we had a pretty good bite 9 days after the full moon. So these tuna are definitely, in my opinion, checking the tide chart, they're checking the moon. They just want to know when it's time for them to eat. And so I think this is kind of interesting. Again, there's a lot of noise in this data, but when I can look at just one landing and take their data and start finding trends that, 4 to 6 days, so a little bit less than a week before the full moon might be a good time to go. And then days after the full moon, well, they wait a week, I guess, because there's just bluefin being bluefin. That's when they decide to start biting again. Now, obviously, the bluefin tuna bite can bite any given time, any day. The data will show that to you. But now I'm looking at the outliers. I'm looking at those spikes. I'm looking at that increase in the bluefin tuna activity. And again, the best time to go fishing is when you can go. I started this as a fun project, but I don't know, maybe there seems to be something to learn from this. Again, this is a pretty small sample set when it comes to all the data that's actually available. But it still took me a while to put together because I had to hand jam a lot of data into spreadsheets. And so if you find this interesting, let me know. I will do more videos like this, and because I kind of want to do it anyway. But if you guys were more, if I knew you were interested in this, it would definitely motivate me to do it faster. And yeah, so all right, 21 hunting and fishing guys, thank you for tuning in. What did we learn today? We learned that the best time to go fishing is when you can go. But other times, either side of the full moon seems to be the best bet. Somewhere between the 70 to 80% illumination before the full moon, and then somewhere between 40 to 50% after the new moon. In terms of days, that means about 3 to 4 days before the full moon, and then about somewhere between a week after the full moon. Seems to be pretty good. And then we had that outlier, that 68%. Again, that was only a difference of 2 days. So if you're on like a 3-day trip or whatever, sometimes that's why you need to go on longer trips, because you might go in a day and a half, and that might be that day and a half that they're just not biting. And if you come back the next day, it's game on, like you saw in some of the raw data I was showing. On day one bluefin tuna bit, and then literally the next day it was what, like 200 and something, 260 something bluefin tuna. They got hungry, so they wanted to eat. Don't fish around the fish counts. You'll always end up disappointed. You just need to figure out when the best time for you to go is. And if you're fishing around the fish counts, it's kind of like fishing for boats. You're just doing what other people do, and you should have been here yesterday. If you want to fish for boats and you really like that guy's nice boat off in the distance, call him and maybe you can go fishing with him next time. But until then, find your own fish. Remember, kill something, drag it back to your cave, and eat it. See ya.